Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Legion video. Since the announcement of Legion's level scaling system, I've seen consistent concerns over it diminishing the sense of progression from the game. Is that concern reasonable? I think it's a reasonable concern, yes. Does it manifest in Legion? No, I don't think so. First, a quick recap on how the level scaling works. In Legion, every leveling zone, i.e. Val'sharah, Azsuna, High Mountain, and Stormheim, will scale to your character's current level. The rewards that you get from quests will also scale to your level, and mobs will almost always be the same level as your character. This means that you pretty much never end up face-rolling mobs. Once you hit level 110, every zone in the Broken Isles is the same level as you are, meaning that content in every zone is of a relevant difficulty. Additionally, players doing leveling content and players at max level are all, for the most part, in the same phase. Essentially, it's one big shared world, something which, due to a few changes and systems, actually does make WoW feel like a more social game. You can check out my video on the new mob tapping system if you're interested to hear more about that. So, with all that explained, is this a good system for the game? Well, first, I don't think it negatively impacts the feeling of progression when leveling in Legion. The leveling of WoW's expansions is generally quite short anyway, so the long-term sort of power progression while leveling isn't really a concern like it would have been in, say, Vanilla or the Burning Crusade. It's also possible to argue that it makes elements of your progression a bit more noticeable. Since everything scales to your level, mobs always present a decent challenge, and this ends up making gear play a more significant role in the leveling, and you really do feel it if you have a few low item level bits of gear on your character. Another benefit of this system is that the content always has the intended level of challenge. No matter where you go in the Broken Isles, you won't be ruffle stomping through mobs, and the gameplay will pretty much always be meaningful. One of the things that has surprised me the most is how mobs in the world are relatively a bit more challenging than they would have been in Warlords of Draenor. Because that gameplay feels a bit more meaningful and satisfying, I think that actually does enhance the feeling of progression as you level up. One thing that I found to be a bit odd about some complaints over the level scaling impacting progression is that for leveling, it's really just like any other expansion. In the past, you move from zone to zone in the order of their level requirement, i.e. you constantly fought mobs that were in and around your own level anyway. Now, one area where the scaling really does change things is your ability to go back to an older zone and easily kill mobs. You can't really do that anymore within the zones of the Broken Isles. I would argue that we're not really losing any real gameplay here. I mean, who went back to Shadowmoon Valley in order to kill weak level 90 deer because the sense of progression over when they were doing that at level 90 was so satisfying? Yeah, we'll make some mob farming a bit different, but I think that's a bit of an edge case that's ancillary to the core enjoyment of endgame progression in WoW. Indeed, in the past, most of an expansion's landmass was irrelevant to max level characters, and that's no longer the case, which I think is certainly a good thing. Now, Blizzard does deviate from other MMOs when it comes to how they do scaling. Most games will scale your character to the level of the zone, but in Legion it scales the zone to the level of your character. Effectively, it's kind of the same thing, but there is a slight difference. The zones don't have a level bracket past being for level 100 to 110 characters. In a game like, say, Guild Wars 2, your character will scale to the level bracket of the zone that you are in. And if you are a high-level character going into a low-level zone, then you'll be scaled to the higher end of that zone's level bracket, meaning that the content in the zone still feels relevant, but it is easy in comparison to you fighting mobs in a zone of your own level, which does reflect the fact that you are going in there with a powerful character. That doesn't really happen within Legion. Now, these systems, basically what I described for Guild Wars 2, could be used in WoW for different purposes. In Legion, they're aiming to just make the entire continent of the Broken Isles the endgame zone. Something akin to what Guild Wars 2 is doing. You could apply that to the entire world of Warcraft, making all content relevant to everyone, while still keeping that sense of progression. I would love to see Blizzard experiment with doing something like that, since there is a lot of content in the game that's lying unused. I do think there is a downside to Blizzard's overarching plan with the Legion leveling. Their scaling system has allowed them to let players tackle zones in any order. That's got great benefits, and I think the benefits do outweigh the problems, but it has had a noticeable impact on the overarching story. I've leveled from 100 to 110 a few times through all of the zones, and really it's as if the Burning Legion doesn't exist. There's no particular threat there. We get 4 sort of main self-contained storylines in each zone, which do tie together for the overall narrative, but there's no real plot continuity as you level. In Warlords, a lot of people liked how you sort of hung around the same cast of characters and you saw them progress as you went through the leveling. Well, that just doesn't seem to happen in Legion. Also, the scaling and ability to tackle the zones in any order seems to have made Blizzard think they can get away with a small number of zones, only 4 to level in, and then Suramar is an exclusively endgame thing. I think this small number of zones does hurt the sense of progression far more than any scaling system does. But overall, to conclude, I really like how the scaling has worked out. It means that the content is always relevant to your character, and it's allowed Blizzard to dial in the difficulty of the leveling content to really not be that brain dead at all in comparison to past expansions. In fact, sometimes it's really quite engaging. Finally though, I would love to see them use that scaling to make the old world zones relevant to max level players again. So hopefully that's something that they get into the game at some point, because I think it would really help. Anyway, that's pretty much it for me. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments or via Twitter, which is the best place to get hold of me. And with that, I will see you next time.